The biggest single interest rate rise for more than 30 years. The Bank of England has just raised its base rate to 3%, an increase of 3/4 of a percentage point as it struggles to contain inflation.
If we do not act forcefully now, it will be worse later on. And as the forecast we are publishing today shows, it is a tough road ahead.
It will mean higher mortgage bills for many, and the bank is also warning the UK could be on course for its longest recession since reliable records began a century ago. Also this lunchtime. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan survives what his supporters say was an assassination attempt. He's been shot in the leg. Could the emergency services have done more to save lives after the Manchester Arena bombing? A report is due out shortly. The migrant crisis in Kent. The Home Secretary visits Dover and Manston to see for herself what is happening there. And why soaring energy bills mean many swimming pools and fitness centres could be forced to close this winter.
Well, I've been coming, 10 years or more? Peter's been coming 16. Yeah.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, it's crunch time in the T20 World Cup group stages as Pakistan dig deep to claim a vital victory over South Africa to avoid elimination.
Hello, good afternoon. In the last hour, interest rates have gone up by 3/4 of a percentage point, the biggest single increase for more than 30 years. It pushes the base rate up to 3% as the Bank of England tries to control inflation. It is the 8th rise in a row, meaning higher mortgage bills for many home owners. Well, meanwhile, the bank's also warning that the UK could be on course for its longest recession since reliable records began. Our economics correspondent Andy Verity reports.
It's the biggest interest rate rise in a third of a century. The cost of living's been rising at its fastest rate for 40 years for global reasons. But the Bank of England's trying to prevent runaway inflation becoming something we expect to continue, so it becomes embedded in the domestic economy.
These are big changes. They have a real impact on people's lives. So why are we doing it? And why are we doing it now when so many people are already struggling with higher energy and food prices and other bills? Well, quite simply, we're increasing bank rate because inflation is too high. And it's the bank's job to bring it down.
In the past half century, the Bank of England's official interest rate has been much higher. But this year's rises mark the end of 13 years of what was supposed to be temporary, emergency low rates, but were kept there because under the policy of austerity, economic growth was so weak. Inflation can be caused by higher costs, like the price of oil, but it can also be made worse by high demand. Too much money spent by households and businesses chasing too few goods. The idea behind raising interest rates is to make it more expensive to borrow and to spend, and that should limit the amount of buying activity, reducing the upward pressure on prices. The risk, though, is if you raise interest rates too far too fast, you can make any recession even worse. Thousands of families have already been hit hard by rising interest rates. In North London, Ajit Thompson earns a good wage in a transport and logistics company, but he's worked out that by next year his costs, including mortgage, food and energy, will have jumped by over £750 a month.
1 week I was really bad. I mean, I was kind of down and also depressed. My wife telling me, don't worry, we will do it somehow.
Ajit was paying 1.38% on a fixed-rate mortgage that just expired, but the best rate he could find to move on to was 4.61%, £371 extra per month.
This is the reality. Now what we're doing is we were actually saving money. We didn't go for holiday last 2 years. Haircuts we do minimum. Some occasionally I start shaving to save £20. If I again not doing those stuff like holidays and stuff, still I probably need about £200. That means you have to start touching your savings, which I'm not comfortable.
After the mini-budget, markets were expecting the Bank of England to have to raise rates to peak at more than 6% next summer. But since Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng resigned, The peak's now expected to be 4.7%. What's extraordinary is that the Bank of England has raised interest rates this quickly, just as it says we're already in a recession expected to last until 2024. If on top of that, the government cuts spending or raises taxes too soon or too severely, ordinary families will again have to pay, not just through higher bills, but higher unemployment. Andy Verity, BBC News.
So, as we've heard, today's interest rate rise will mean significantly higher mortgage payments for millions of homeowners at a time when many people are already struggling to make ends meet with surging inflation and energy bills. Our correspondent Navtej Johal reports for us now from Derby.
Omar is a veterinary surgeon based in Derby. He came to the UK 4 years ago and had planned to buy a home and settle here long term. But the recent political and economic turmoil following now former Prime Minister Liz Truss's mini-budget has made him think twice.
When I lose trust in something, it's really difficult to gain it back. Have
you lost trust in the UK?
I trust my colleagues, I trust my friends, I trust a lot of people in the UK. It shook my trust in the system.
With interest rates rising further today, which is likely to make mortgages even more expensive, Omar says he's now considering whether he should even stay in the UK.
Let's say for the next year, if this continues to happen, okay, so my theoretical plans on paper, I will start to move, consider other options, consider higher income. I cannot ask for salary raises every day.
And you may leave the country?
Sure.
Becky was hoping to buy her first house in Derby with her partner.
We were working it out and thinking, yeah, we can do this. With the rates now, we're a lot more hesitant. You're just banging your head up against a brick wall, like, where do I go from here? What's the answer? What's the solution? And right now, I genuinely don't know the answer to that question.
Jay runs a music venue in the city. He's a homeowner who's worried about his repayments jumping massively in a few months' time.
It's going to increase by about 4% at the moment. I'm looking at around about £150 a month increase on my monthly payment. The basic things that people need is a roof over their head to be able to keep warm and to be able to eat. And it feels like all three elements there are being attacked by what's going on in the economy.
But despite the recent rises in interest rates, people are still getting or renewing their mortgage here in Derby and across the country. But perhaps even more elusive than a decent mortgage deal at the moment is some level of certainty about what comes next.
Take a 25-year mortgage.
Michelle has worked in the mortgage industry for more than 20 years. She says she's never seen anything like the current situation.
There's a lot of Rolls-Royce workers around here, a lot of nurses, teachers, NHS workers. They're the ones that we deal with. And 2.4 children families, a lot of what you would consider to be safe, above the breadline, whereas I don't think these people are anymore.
In these uncertain times, many are bracing themselves for what the next few months may hold. Navtej Johal, BBC News, Derby.
Let's go live now to our economics editor, Faisal Islam, who's at the Bank of England. Faisal, this rate rise was widely expected and anticipated. The question is, though, I suppose, how much higher could rates go?
That is exactly the question, and I think the Bank of England is aware of the presentational problem of not just raising rates today by the highest amount we've seen in more than 3 decades, but doing so at the exact same time that they're saying we face a recession that could last 2 years. Why are they doing those things at the same time? Well, the answer I just got actually from the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey was yes, he thinks that in order to hit inflation, which is still running at double digits, 10-11% it's heading towards, if they don't deal with that now, it will get worse and rates would have to go even higher. But having said that, having made that tough message, they also wanted to give a slightly more optimistic message on just how high rates might go. There were fears that they'd go up to 6%. The markets were assuming they'd go up to 5.25% next year. They also want to send the message that although rates will continue to go up, they won't go as high as that. So what we deduce from that is that they may peak at around 4.5 7-ish% next year. But set against all of that is the grim tale of how the economy is going to be in recession for at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years, as they predict, with unemployment going up too, household incomes squeezed as well. They're painting a pretty grim picture of what will have been 5 years of economic stagnation.
Faisal, thank you very much. Faisal Islam there, our economics editor. And just to say, if you are a homeowner and you want to get an idea of just how much your mortgage might go up by, there's a handy calculator on our website at bbc.co.uk/news. The former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan, has been shot while leading a protest march in the east of the country near Lahore. He's said to be in a stable condition in hospital after being shot in the leg. Imran Khan was leading a march on the capital, Islamabad, to demand snap elections, as Howard Johnson reports.
Imran Khan was giving a speech in northeastern Pakistan when a gunman opened fire. Wounded, the 70-year-old politician was rushed to hospital. The former Prime Minister had been leading a motorised caravan across Pakistan to urge the government to call a snap election. A man was detained at the scene. In April, Mr. Khan was ousted from power after losing a no-confidence vote in his leadership over economic mismanagement and mishandling of the country's foreign policy. It's a far cry from the Oxford graduate's carefree days as Pakistan's charismatic cricket captain. In 1992, he led the country to victory in the World Cup. The fame that followed secured him a top table in London's social scene. In 1995, he married British heiress Jemima Goldsmith. After a 9-year relationship, they separated. Mr. Khan had turned his attention to politics in his country of birth. Wading into Pakistan's turbulent and corrupt political scene, Mr. Khan offered a fresh-faced alternative to military and dynastic rule. He shunned his international playboy image and turned to Islam. The move gave him broad-based support, becoming Prime Minister in 2018. Following his ousting this year, he was arrested under anti-terror charges over allegations he made threats against state officials. He denies the allegations. Howard Johnson, BBC News.
And the time is just 12 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. The Bank of England raises interest rates to 3% in the biggest single hike for more than 30 years.
Lift it up. OK, guys, well done.
And coming up, the swimming pools and the gyms that could be forced to close this winter as a result of soaring energy costs.
Coming up on the BBC News channel.
Could any of the victims of the Manchester Arena bombing have survived if the emergency services had responded more quickly? That is one of the key questions for the inquiry into the attack, which is publishing this afternoon its report into the response of the police, ambulance and fire services. 22 people died in the bombing 5 years ago at an Ariana Grande concert. Our North of England correspondent Judith Moritz has this report.
Breaking news out of Greater Manchester.
22nd of May 2017, late at night, a major incident is announced.
There have been confirmed a number of fatalities following reports of an explosion at Manchester Arena.
Sirens screeched towards the scene. But the police were in disarray. Paramedics mostly stayed out of the blast area, and the fire service didn't respond at all for more than 2 hours. Firefighters were held back at a station 3 miles away.
We just waited and waited for instruction.
This firefighter speaking anonymously for fear of losing his job.
So as time and time went on, it was more embarrassing and more frustrating, because you hear reports of that people were dying. There were people getting ferried to hospitals all over the northwest. And then there's the feeling of guilt. Well, maybe if I did something, even so small, you know, you can hold your head up high, but to stand there and then do nothing all that time, it was embarrassing, shameful.
The The arena was full of young people who'd been at an Ariana Grande concert. Moments after the performance ended, the bomb went off in the foyer area known as the City Room. It was full of parents waiting to meet their children. Andrea Bradbury was there to collect her daughter.
So there was just a massive blast and the whoosh, but then just felt like the backs of my legs were being stringed with wire, and then I just hit the deck and was knocked unconscious.
Andrea soon came round and immediately knew a bomb had exploded. She'd only just retired as a counter-terrorism police officer in Lancashire. So she phoned the incident in and then, despite being injured, she travelled to Greater Manchester Police Headquarters, but says no one there would listen to her.
I just wanted to shout at them, I am an inspector from the counter-terrorism branch with a vast experience in contingency planning, and I was in the middle of it.
What you're saying is you were doing your best to
try
tell them
and-
what was happening.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is nobody there really paid attention to what you were saying.
No, they're all rabbits running in headlights.
The Manchester Arena inquiry spent months examining every aspect of the emergency response to the attack. And each one of the blue light services accepted some failings and said sorry to the bereaved and injured. 22 people, including teenagers and children, were murdered. The public inquiry heard that 20 of them suffered injuries which were unsurvivable. But experts couldn't agree over whether the youngest victim, 8-year-old Safi Rose Roussos, might have lived with different care. And they believe that 28-year-old John Atkinson could have survived had he been given treatment more quickly.
The family have, for completely understandable reasons, just feel completely let down by North West Ambulance Service. That's something that they're going to have to live with for the rest of their life, that there were medical people there and yet John wasn't treated appropriately and as quickly as he should have been.
Today's report is the second of 3 which are being published by the public inquiry. More than 5 years after the bombing, which claimed and affected so many lives, the process to understand what happened continues. Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester.
And let's go live now to our correspondent Danny Savage, who's also in Manchester. Danny, tell us more about what we might expect from the report that's published later on today.
Yeah, 2:30 this afternoon, Ben, is when that report will be officially published. We'll then hear from the chairman of the inquiry, Sir John Saunders, who's been listening to all the evidence. He's written this report. He'll talk for a short time at 2:30, and then throughout the rest of the afternoon we'll be hearing from families of the victims, also from those emergency services that are likely to be strongly criticised in that report when it comes out. When the legal representatives of the families made their final submissions to the chairman in the evidence a few months ago, they said things like police abjectly failed to coordinate the emergency response. There was a command vacuum. There was no organised multi-agency working. Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue didn't turn up. Little or no paramedic care was available in the City Room. Only 3 paramedics ever went into that room where the bomb went off, when there was all those casualties in there. There is a long, long list of criticisms of the blue light emergency services, and I think even they already say in reflection that they would have done things much, much differently with hindsight. But let's see what they say this afternoon. Let's see how critical that report is. We'll know more in just over an hour's time, Ben.
OK, Danny, thank you very much. Danny Savage. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, has been visiting Dover as the government grapples with the overcrowding crisis at the Manston Asylum site in Kent. The government's facing a possible legal challenge over its running of the immigration centre as the high number of small boat channel crossings continues. John Donnison is in Dover for us this lunchtime. John, what has the Home Secretary been doing and what are her plans for the day?
Well, Ben, a pretty grim morning weather-wise here in Dover. Pretty unlikely, I think, that anyone will be crossing in a small boat today. But Suella Braverman here to see firsthand what she has acknowledged herself after 12 years of Conservative government is a broken asylum system. She's under pressure and she swept into Dover this morning in her convoy. She certainly wasn't speaking to any reporters. She went first to the processing centre here on the quayside in Dover, where we saw that petrol bomb attack over the weekend. She's also been speaking to the Coast Guard, and then this afternoon she's heading up to Manston. Now there, the overcrowding pressures have eased a little in the last few days, with busloads of migrants leaving in coaches and being taken to hotels around the country. But you've got to remember that that processing centre, designed only to hold around about 1,000 people, there were 4,000 at the weekend, and designed only to hold people for very short periods of time. We've spoken to people who were there for more than 3 weeks, and she is, as you say, under pressure because she faces a legal challenge potentially, arguing whether those detentions in those conditions were illegal and whether she ignored advice telling her such detentions were illegal, something she denies.
John, thank you very much. John Donnison reporting. Now, with growing pressure on global energy supplies because of the war in Ukraine, the UK increasingly relies on imports of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. But that is coming at a cost to the environment, according to new research. It shows the production and transport of LNG can be up to 10 times the carbon emissions of pipeline gas. Here's Matt McGrath.
Pembrokeshire in Wales is famous for its beautiful beaches, but just around the corner from some of the finest sands in the UK is this. The area is also home to several oil and gas refineries, with the port of Milford Haven now one of the biggest LNG terminals in Europe. All across the continent, imports of liquefied natural gas are up around 65% since the invasion of Ukraine at the start of this year. LNG is basically just natural gas, but in a liquid form. To make it, natural gas is cooled in giant fridges to minus 160 degrees Celsius. As it liquefies, it shrinks and becomes 600 times smaller, making it easier to transport. But this convenience comes with a hidden cost for the planet. When the LNG tankers come into port here at Milford Haven, the chilled liquefied gas is pumped ashore along this network of pipes here. It's then turned back into natural gas and sent across the country for everyone to use. But all that cooling and carrying of the gas is very energy intensive and generates significant amounts of climate warming gases. According to a new analysis by Norwegian research firm Rystad Energy, the making and shipping of liquefied natural gas can generate up to 10 times more CO2 compared to gas that comes in a pipeline.
It's almost or greater than 10 times higher than piped gas from Norway. And if we compare that to Russian piped gas, we're looking at greater than double the emissions intensity of Russian piped gas. So whichever way you look at it, it's far more significant, the emissions from LNG to piped gas.
When liquefied natural gas is burnt to create electricity or to keep us warm in our homes, it emits the same amount of CO2 as regular piped gas. But it's these hidden emissions in the manufacture and transport that really make the difference. By the end of 2023, up to 35 million extra tonnes of CO2 could be created by the switch. That's the equivalent of adding 16 million cars to the UK's roads for 2 years. This LNG boom is having positive impacts on the local economy here in Pembrokeshire, and some 20 new terminals are also being brought into service across Europe to cope with the influx of liquid gas. But there's a concern that this short-term energy fix will grow into longer-term dependence. And while Europe and the UK are planning more renewables, these additional emissions in liquefied natural gas will put extra pressure on plans to cut carbon over the next 8 years. Matt McGrath, BBC News, Pembrokeshire.
A United Nations report says a third of the glaciers located in World Heritage Sites will vanish by 2050 because of climate change. Researchers concluded that even if global temperature increases were kept below 1.5 degrees, glaciers at sites like Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, Yosemite in the United States and the Alps would disappear in 3 decades. Officials in Ukraine say the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant has been disconnected from the power grid. It said that Russian shelling had damaged the remaining high voltage lines connecting it to the national system. In recent weeks, Russian attacks have targeted civilian infrastructure. Ukraine has lost as much as 40% of its power supply. Parliament's Committee on Standards has recommended that the Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen should be suspended from the Commons for 5 days for breaching its code of conduct. Officials say he displayed a cavalier attitude to the rules on lobbying and made an unacceptable attack on the integrity of the Standards Commissioner. Mr Bridgen has said he's extremely disappointed but will accept the suspension. Almost half of UK workers have had their accents mocked, criticised or singled out in a social setting, according to a new survey today. The social mobility charity The Sutton Trust says accents from the north of England and the Midlands are still viewed as less favourable than others. Many people admitted anxiety over their future career prospects because of perceived prejudiced attitudes. Now let's return to our top story, and in the last hour or so interest rates have gone up by 0.75 of a percentage point. That is the biggest single increase for more than 3 decades. Well, it pushes the base rate up to 3%, and the Bank of England is also warning the UK could be on course for its longest recession for over a century. Well, the governor's been explaining why he felt this latest interest rate rise was needed.
People should not have to worry about inflation as they go about their daily business. That's why we've been raising interest rates and did so again today. Low and stable inflation is the bedrock of a stable economy, a predictable economy in which people can go about their lives and plan for their futures with confidence. An economy in which hard-earned money keeps its value. If we do not act forcefully now, it will be worse later on.
Well, those economic warnings come as dozens of leisure centres, swimming pools and gyms could be forced to close this winter as a result of soaring energy costs. Public sector leisure services are likely to be cut in 40% of council areas in the next 5 months, according to the trade body UK Active. And the cost of living crisis means many people can no longer afford membership of fitness centres, potentially affecting their physical and their mental health. Our sports news correspondent Laura Scott reports.
Lift it up. OK, guys, well done.
A lunchtime aquarobics class that means much more than simply exercise for this group of swimmers.
Come on, guys, through the water. Push it through.
For Peter, whose wife has dementia, it's some precious time to himself. Janet says it's vital for her joints, while Maureen says it helps her mental health.
This class clearly means a lot to you, doesn't it?
Well, I've been coming, 10 years or more? Yeah. Peter's been coming 16. Yeah. And for us, it's the physical. It's just being with everybody else and the sort of the mental side of it and your health issues. I had a back operation in November and this is what they told me to do.
But Rye Sports Centre is shutting the pool for the winter because energy bills have jumped by £92,000 a year. And there was a wave of emotion as it sunk in that this week's class was the last for a while, perhaps forever.
This was a vital lifeline for a lot of people to keep them fit, to keep them healthy, to keep them moving, and a lot of them are just going to not do anything.
I mean, I know it's a money thing. I mean, I wished I could back it, but I couldn't. I can't even back myself.
Despite benefiting from the government's energy bill relief scheme, the rest of the industry is feeling the squeeze. A recent UK Active survey of public sector operators, shared exclusively with the BBC, revealed that leisure services are expected to be cut in 40% of the UK's council areas in the next 5 months, and in 3/4 of council areas by the end of March 2024.
I worry that this could create a major physical and mental health crisis in the country if we don't find solutions in the coming weeks to support these facilities through the winter. So this is as challenging, if not a more challenging period than the pandemic was for many of my members.
But of course, it's not just the facilities that are facing challenging decisions this winter because of rising energy bills. It's the people who use them and in many cases rely on them.
So 1, 2. It's moving round. 1, 2. Good, and again.
At the Switch Up boxing gym in Mansfield, parents are grappling with how to make savings in every area of their lives.
When winter comes, because of my disability, so I'll have to have the heating on a little bit more, and then it's just going to be difficult to bring him here with how tight money and everything's shooting up.
If we need choose between food and sport, we're going to let's eat.
Eat less.
Yeah.
Stark decisions are already being made as the affordability and accessibility of sport comes under increasing strain, and authorities warn of a darker period ahead. Laura Scott, BBC News.
OK, it's time for a look at the weather forecast for you now. Here's Christopher Blanchett. How's it looking?
Pretty wet for some of us, Ben. Thanks very much indeed. Yes, a very good afternoon to you. It was very wet across parts of the southeast of England overnight last night and into this morning, South Wales as well. And, you know, some parts of Essex in towards Kent and Sussex, the London area, seeing around about a half to 3/4 of their normal November rainfall in less than 24 hours. We do need the rain through parts of England, but that is not particularly helpful for refilling our reservoirs when it happens so quickly. As we head through the next few hours, we've got that rain in the southeast clearing away. Elsewhere, some sunshine and also a rash of showers across parts of Wales and the southwest. Those could well be thundery. For much of Scotland and Northern Ireland, some sunshine, a few showers and temperatures around about average. Into this evening, and you can see that circulation of showers across the southwest. These will be heavy, perhaps thundery, and accompanied by brisk winds coming in from the northwest, affecting some coastal parts. Through the early hours, that rash of showers moving eastwards, affecting the southeast of England, once again thundery for some. Elsewhere overnight, that circulation clears away. You can see this ridge of high pressure just building in, and for some that means it's a quiet night, a dry night, a chilly night. Through parts of Scotland, even in the central belt towns and cities, down to freezing, if not lower. So for some on Friday morning, scraping the windscreen, I should imagine. For many, it's a cool start on Friday, but a dry one, some sunshine around, a few showers across the Highlands and Islands, a brisk northwest wind here. Elsewhere, though, mostly dry with light winds and a pretty decent day of weather on Friday, has to be said. Temperatures around about 10 to 14 Celsius, north to south, 1 or 2 showers here and there. And then, as we head into the weekend, we say goodbye to the dry conditions on Friday and a return to low pressure in the Atlantic, sending weather fronts and rain our way, so unsettled both days. Let's start with Saturday, and you can see on the chart we've got a weather front sweeping its way eastwards, bringing some cloud and rain with it. Drying up, brightening up through Northern Ireland, the west of Scotland, in towards parts of Wales and the southwest. But the north of England, the Midlands and the southeast holding on to the cloud and some outbreaks of rain. Temperatures again 10 to 14 Celsius north to south. Saturday evening, Saturday night, bonfire night. Lots of events taking place, and for a good part of the country, hopefully it should be dry with some clear skies. Breezy with showers across parts of Northern Ireland and the northwest. The southeast cloudy with some rain at times, but not a washout. So to recap the weekend, on Saturday we've got some heavy rain tracking west to east across the country, drier by bonfire night. Sunday, some heavy rain lingering across parts of the southeast. That's the forecast for now. Ben.
Thank you very much indeed. And a reminder of our top story this lunchtime. The Bank of England raises interest rates to 3% in the biggest single hike for well over 30 years. That's all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me, and on BBC One now, we'll join the BBC's news teams where you are. Have a very good afternoon.